The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, it's Denise. Happy Monday. If you guys could go ahead and just how we start every class, raise your hand if you can see my screen. Ooh, people cannot see my screen. Can you guys hear me? Can you see my screen? Raise your hand. Again. Oh, it looks like I was muted. Okay. Now, if you guys can hear me, or see my screen, please raise your hands. Great. Okay, I'm glad we have that check in place. Yes, excellent. All right, guys, let me try that again. Happy Monday. I hope everyone has enjoyed their day so far. And to get started with today, I wanted to just go over how you guys could get in touch with me if you have questions or if you were working on that, if you decided to work on any of the challenges. Yes, you can go ahead. And the email, I know I said that I was going to post my own email, but actually I got access to the Young Engineers of Today email. So both Mr. D and I have access to this email here. And we were reading some of your responses this weekend. I will try to get back to you guys as soon as possible. We'll just do the best we can with that email. But especially if you guys are having any hardware, software problem with your Pis. And I also wanted to talk about just this open mic. And that's just a time where you guys can come if you have any questions, specific questions on your code or specific questions on a certain topic, such as for loops, which we're going to get to today, or anything really. Or it could be even more broad topics, like maybe you wanted to come and talk to us about you're feeling like we're going a little bit too fast, or maybe you want more of a challenge. You can come and either Mr. D and I will be working this Wednesday 9 to 10, and then next week we're actually going to have a different time. We're not going to have the same time every week, so if you can't come to this time, don't worry. Next week there'll be a better time for you. Also, if you have a really important question or something on your mind that you think would be more useful, that you want to make it to the open mic but you can't, go ahead and email me your question. And if there's time on Wednesday, I'll be recording the open mic session. And what we can do is we can actually record my response to your question so that you'll have that. And I can email saying, hey, I responded to your question, and around, such and such minute on this video that I just posted. If you have a question with your code, such you just can't figure out why a code doesn't work, go ahead and send the whole .py file instead of trying to copy and paste the text into the email. If your code is on your Raspberry Pi and you're not connected to the internet, grab a data stick or a USB and plug that in where your keyboard is, the USB port that you plug your keyboard into, because you're going to need the mouse. And you can drag that file into the USB and send it that way over email. All right, so we just went through a lot of information there. Go over it briefly again at the end. But that's how you can stay in contact with us if you have any questions with your code, if you want more of a challenge, etc. Okay, let's see. I have one question here of who I was rooting for in the Super Bowl before we get started. Thanks for asking, Stephen. I actually had to work last night and I could not watch the Super Bowl. I actually watched the Puppy Bowl for a little bit. That was playing in our bakery, which was awesome. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching the Super Bowl if you did that. I have a couple responses of who other people were rooting for. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on the presentation today. The first thing that we are going to do, oh, we have another question. I have a question from Elias. How do you get Python to print a random word from a list? Well, that is actually something that we are going to talk about with our code, right? Because Hangman uses that. That's how we, when we're playing Hangman, that's how the word gets chosen for the player. So we're probably going to talk about that on Wednesday, but I can point to exactly where in the code that is, if you want that before Wednesday, just real fast. What you do is you use the random integer, and we'll talk a little bit about why you have to make it this length, but you're choosing the index, right? And this is your word list of your words, right? And you're choosing, it's a little bit more complicated. It's hard to show you real fast, but this is the part of the code that explains it. And it's just you're choosing the random integer, which will correlate to the index of the word that gets chosen. All right, so we're going to go into more detail, explain what all this means on Wednesday. Okay, so the first thing we're actually going to do today, I'm not going to go into any more detail about the debugger, but I just want to remind you guys how to get to it. Open up Python, you have Python shell up, and you see that debug up there. Click on the debugger and that should pop up. These are already checked off on the side for me, but normally when you open it, these will not be checked, so just make sure to go ahead and check those. Our globals area should pop up. And just to go through the buttons, Go runs the code through as though you had just run it normally. Step will step one line through the code at a time. If you are on a function call and you press step one more time, you are stepping into the function, and you will go from the function call up to the top of the program where that function definition is and run through the function block, right? And if that's a function written by Python, like input or print, you're actually going to open into another window. So to avoid that, you could have pressed step over when the line of the function call is highlighted, or if you're already in that window, you can step out. Lastly, quit will stop the program from running. This is helpful if you press go and you get stuck in an infinite loop. And we can talk about infinite loops a little bit later. There'll be an example. All right. To get so we're in the shell for now. We can open any program that we want to run the debugger through, and you just press run module, and that will activate the debugger. Remember, you have to go to the shell, open the debugger, then go to your program window, then run the program. So that's kind of the order of events. Then you're ready to go. I'm going to quit out of that actually. And now that I exit out, I can go back to the shell, and you'll see like debug is off, and the debugger is no longer checked. Oh, someone is asking if we have to type anything right now, and no, you do not. You don't have to type that. That was just showing you. We'll go into this later, but you won't have to type that later today. All right, I have a question from Colette. And Colette, if you want to go ahead, if you have a specific question about your code, a lot of times this one is saying invalid syntax, and if you can send me your code and I can look at it, but also we're going to be going through the code line by line on Wednesday. So if you just have your code there, even if it's not working, once you better understand the code, then we'll be able to see how it runs. It's okay that it's not running right now. So your options are you can wait till Wednesday and try to fix it once you understand how the code works, or you can go ahead and send me the whole file so that I can go ahead and take a look at it. It's just a little hard for me to know what's going on unless I can see it in front of me. All right, so we are using Invent Your Own Computer Games with Python, the free book. available through Elseif, or written by Elseif. And we're going to go through more of the hangman topics. Well, remember last Monday we learned about a lot of these methods, and continue doing that on Wednesday. We learned about the range function, the list function, and then today we're going to go through, we're going to review some of this, and we're going to learn about for loops and Elseif statements. We're going to get to these on Wednesday. All right, so we learned about multi-line strings, started with these triple single quotation marks. We learned about if you write your variable in all capital letters, that just means it's a constant variable and it's going to remain the same value throughout the whole program. Writing it in not all capital letters just lets other programmers know that you are using a constant variable. We talked about lists, which are denoted with square brackets, and they can have multiple values assigned to them, and each value is called an item. The in operator checks to see if a value is in a string or in a list, and it will respond with a Boolean operator. True if it is in, and false if it's not in. Delete statements. I think a lot of people, at least in my class, are having trouble with delete statements, so we're going to go over that a little bit today. That's how you remove an item from a list. And lists of lists, you can have a list where an item is another list. And if you want to get an item from a list that is in a list, remember to call any item from a list, you name the list. So let's say it's a list of dogs, and the variable that it's saved in is dogs. You have dogs and then that one bracket, right? I'm going to pull up shell. Yeah, you don't have to worry about this right now either, just down here. Right, so that's, a list of dogs. To get to poodles, I would type dogs1, that's index 0, that's index 1. And that is just referring, and I can use that now as a string. That's the value of a string. So I could use it, print dogs1, and that would be the same as printing the string poodles. Well, if I have a list of lists, I actually don't know that many kinds of cats. All right, so then if my list of pets was the list dogs and the list cats, in order to get to poodles, I would use this first index to indicate that I wanted an item from the 0th list, and the second index to indicate that I wanted the first item from that list, poodles. And I get A. That is not correct. Oh, oops. So actually, what this did here, this is a little bit tricky. I used dogs instead of pets. So if I do this for pets, right, exactly, Reese. Reese just commented this. It should be pets 0, 1. Exactly. I made a mistake, but actually what I did shows you if you say from dogs, I want the first item, the 0th item, and then we're talking labs, and I want the first of that, it will actually give me the first string value. So, even more complicated. So if I wanted that S from poodles, if I wanted the P from poodles, I could actually go, okay, from the pets, I want the 0th list, which is dogs. I want the first item, which is poodles, and I want that 0th string value, which is the P from poodles, right? So we're talking about letters here with this last one. All right. So those are the double indices. Let's go back here. delete statements. Delete statements, you take a list, this one is fruit, and you can delete the third item from that list, which in this case is Dalmatians. And if you recheck, it's just the same list without that third index, that third item. You can do that with any of the indexes, 0, 1, 2, or 3, and it'll just delete that item. All right, so now we're going to go through some questions. Again, it's going to be similar. Raise your hand if you know the answer. You can also type in, but it's nice for everyone to be able to hear your answer, so go ahead and either raise your hand or type in a response. This question, what punctuation attaches an object to its method? So if we remember, with methods, we have an object, and then we have that method with the parentheses. And so like an example of an object is a string or a list. And then we attach it to a method. You can think. Hi, Stephen, what do you think?
A period.
A period, exactly correct. Awesome. Yeah, if you guys remember, we have the lower and the upper methods, and we attach strings to those with a period, and we'll look at that right here. Right, we have that string, a period, and then the method. And then this string, a period, and then the method. And there should be 2 parentheses here, they just got cut off. Alright, so does anyone know what this would evaluate to if you typed this line of code into Python and pressed enter? Any idea? You can raise your hand or type in. And don't think that if you're raising your hand for every question and I stop calling on you, I'm not picking on you. I'm trying to give someone else a chance. Hey Reese, what do you think?
I think it would be hello team, but in all caps.
Absolutely correct. Yes. So, as Reese has pointed out, this will be all caps when you press enter. And what happens is that first, Python evaluates this code left to right. So first, it takes all of these letters and lowercases the whole string, and then takes that string and capitalizes each letter. Right, so it evaluates left, first doing the lowercase, and then takes that string and makes it all uppercase. All right, this is a kind of wonky question. I should have changed it. So the answer to this question is no. The reverse method does not work for strings and lists. It's really important for you guys to remember that the methods only work for a specific object. So a method is for a string. It's a string method. Or a method is for a list. It's a list method. So do we use reverse methods with strings or with lists? Anyone know? You can type in your answer, or just a guess, really. You can just take a guess, raise your hand, and you can guess. I have a guess here, lists, and that is absolutely correct. All right, so the answer to this question is no. I'm going to go ahead and change it. Because it's really important to remember that you can only use a method with a string or a list, right? And the answer is lists. So if we remember the reverse method, we can take the list dogs, and we can reverse it using the reverse method, attaching it with a period. And now if we look at dogs, poodles is first and labs is last. All right. How do you add items to a list? I will give you a hint here. You cannot use the addition symbol. Let's take a look at what happens if you try to use the addition symbol. Even when I try to just add a string, Python does not understand saying you can't take a list and just add an integer to it. That's not how it works. Doesn't understand those 2 things. So, does anyone remember the name of the method that I can call on to add goldens to my list? This has been a tricky one. It starts with an A. It is not add. Hey, Stephen, what do you think?
Append.
Absolutely correct. Awesome. Yeah, so we have dog. If we want to append something to dogs, we can use the append method. And this one's a little bit different because we don't, we actually give append, the method, an argument. And we give it the argument Goldens. So we have the list, and then we append to it what we put in the parentheses, which is that string there. So now we take a look at dogs, and it's poodles, labs, and Goldens, and that got added. So that could be very useful in your code if you need to be, if you're going through a loop and adding something every time, you'd be using this append. All right. Does the split method split a list into strings or a string into a list? So this is also not the best phrased question. But what I'm asking here, I'm going to go ahead and have everyone put down their hands and then raise your hand if you think the split method works to split a list into a string. All right. Raise your hand if you think the split method takes a string and makes a list. Great. Okay. Seeing a few more hands this time. You guys are right. It was actually the second one. So let's take a look at that. We had a few people raise their hand for both. But it's the second one. So the split method takes a string, such as, hello class, happy Monday, which I know is what you all thought this morning. And you can split it, and it takes this string, and it's going to make a list. And I'm going to save it to a variable, so that way I can see how it changes. I can check on that variable, because it's not going to give me a return value. All right, and it made a list, and each item in the list is a word. Notice that the punctuation is added to that word, and it's because Python can tell based off of the spaces with each word. Right, so hello is one item in the list, and then class, and then happy, and then Monday. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put everyone's hand down so I don't get confused, but you can raise it again if you have a question. All right, this one's a little bit trickier. So for these are two kind of expressions and responses from Python. And I'm using the range function, and I'm using the list function to view what the range function created, the range object. So what number did I type in here, and what two numbers did I type in here? This would be an argument. What single argument, and what two arguments did I type in to get this range? And I'm going to give everyone a few seconds. Go ahead and just take a guess. Go ahead, type into questions. We have no guesses, it's just a number. And okay. We have a guess here of not quite. All right, let's see. Hey, Stephen, what do you think?
Well, for the second one, it's 10 and 20, but I'm not sure for the first one.
Excellent. Yes, that's right. So for the second one, it is 10 and 20. We have a few people saying 10 and 19, and that's close, and we'll explain that in 1 second. And we have a lot of people saying 9 for this first one. But let's take a look. Salad 9 is not quite right. Almost there. Let's take a look at that. So what we're doing when we create this list, let's start with the double argument. And when I say double argument, I'm going to type in two arguments into this range here, two numbers. So the first one that you type is where you want Python to start. And Python will use this integer. It is going to include this in the range. So let's start at 5. And for the second, I am going to tell Python when to stop. And so Python is not going to use the second integer when it creates its list. Right, so it's going to create a list from 5, and we're going to stop at 15, from 5 to 15, but not including 15. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, we get integers 5 to 14. And so for this one here, I had it from 10 to 20. And we have integers 10 up to 19, not including 20. And so that's what the numbers that were in here, which is what Stephen told us. And what and yes, and I have a couple people here who are saying it was 10 for the first one, and that's true. And so when you're just giving Python one argument or one number with the range function, Python is going to assume that you're starting at 0. So if I type range from 0 to 10, goes from 0 and stops at 9, it does not include 10, it's the same as simply typing 10. Because Python knows if you're only giving me one number, it means you want me to start at 0. All right, and so we have one more question. I'm really glad we got a bunch of guesses for that round, though. That was great. A much better response. All right. So here we have the list fruit with these items, and we have the function, and this, I will give you a hint, this is the length function. So what would be the length of this list fruit? All right, what do you think, Stephen?
I think 4.
4? You are
4.
correct. That is right. So we have a couple guesses here for 4. That's right, Stephen. That's great. And yeah, and Colette, that's the exact reason. You're guessing how many items are in the list fruit. And that's why you're counting the items. I also have a couple answers here that say 3. And I understand why that's confusing, and that's because we're dealing with the difference between the index, how high the index goes, and the length, or the amount of items in the list. Let's take a look at that for 1 minute. So we have fruit, apples, bananas, cherries, and I'm gonna have to say donuts. There can be some fruit in a donut, so I think it counts. All right, and we can get the length of fruit. That again, as we know, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4 items, and that does give 4. But what happens if I try to get use the index 4? I get an error, and that's because when we're counting, we start with 1. Apples means 1, bananas means 2, cherries means 3. But when we're indexing, we're starting with 0. So even when you use the 0th index, 0, 1, 2, 3, if you count that on your fingers, it's still 4. It just can be tricky. So you're still counting 2, 4. You're still counting 4 items, or holding up 4 fingers when you count. It's just your index is going to be 1 less than the length. Great. All right. Yeah, so we just went through some methods and those functions there from last time. Do we have any questions before we start to go through some new material? All right, I don't see any questions. Great, you guys. Let's take a look at for loops. For loops are loops designed for lists of values, and generally, you write them as for, and then a variable name, then in, and then a sequence or a range object. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Each time the program goes through the loop, that's known as an iteration. So when it goes through the loop one time, that's one iteration. The variable takes on the value of the next item in the list. So however many items are in your range, that's how many iterations your for loop will go through. All right, so I'm going to give everyone a few minutes, a couple minutes, just to make sure idle is up and running on either your Pi or your computer. Go ahead and put your hand up when you're ready. If you already have idle up, you can go ahead and put your hand up now and just leave it up. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to catch up. And I just want your Python shell to be up so that you can test out some of these ideas. Great, we already have a lot of hands up. We're just going to wait a couple minutes. If you can't put your hand up because you're using an iPod or something like that, go ahead and just let me know that you're ready in the questions. All right, so we have almost everybody. It looks like just one or two more. All right, we're going to give them one more minute, and while they are still pulling up their Python, just for some people that have got here late, I'm going to bring up that we're having a help session Wednesday 9 to 10. If you can't make it this week, don't worry. We're probably going to have a different time next week, or we can you can send us a question and we can try to record it during that hour and send you the response. But this week from 9 to 10, you'll still have your regular time on Wednesday, but this is an optional, completely optional, not mandatory, time to come in and ask any questions that you're having. If you do have a specific question with your code, you can send the whole file, the whole .py file, to this email here, which should be on Edmodo. All right, so we're going to go ahead and keep going. Thanks, guys. And we're going to take a look at a for loop. We're going to do an example here. All right, so we're going to start by typing that for. And the variable that we're going to use for this first for loop that we're doing is I. We have that in. And then we're going to make a range object, and our range is going to be 10. So if we look up here at this list range 10, we're going to be going, we're going to have the first time it goes through the loop, I is going to be 0. The second time it goes through the loop, I is going to be 1. And so on until we get to 9. So it's nice that we have this up here to kind of help us out with what this range 10 means. All right, and so right there, I pressed enter before adding on my colon. Got to have that colon there for this loop. All right, and I pressed enter and it indented for me. and we are in the Python shell right now. And we're going to just print I. So what it's going to do is every time it goes through the loop, the I is going to take on a value in this range, and then it's going to print whatever value it is for that loop, for that iteration. And so let's see what happens. So double click enter. So for the first or the 0th iteration, I takes on the value of 0, and it gets printed, print 0. And that continues through this. Then I takes on 1, I takes on 2, and it just simply prints as it goes through. And this kind of just demonstrates how the for loop works. And a lot of times we see the variable name I, and we'll see, something similar to range or just a list of numbers. But you can actually use anything for the variable name. So here we can use things. And things is just a variable for this for loop, just a stand-in. And we again type that in. And this time I'm going to make sentences I have a question here from Reese. It says it just printed 10 eyes. You've got to make sure you have let's see here. Let me find your... Hey Reese, are you sure you typed exactly for I in range 10 with that colon and then print I?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay,
wait.
Yeah, it just sounds like a little syntax error or something like that.
Okay.
Alright, keep looking at it. I have one question here from Colton. Hey Colton, what's your question?
Oh, I accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, okay, no problem there. Alright. So I'm going to use a for loop to write 4 sentences about things I like. So every time it goes through the loop, it's going to replace this variable with things that I like from this list of things that I like. And I can just write it here. I can just write a list. I like my dog. I like Fridays. I like ice cream. And I like Python. Alright, and I have that colon there. And every iteration is just going to take this, that variable things is going to take a string value from the list. Since the length of this list is 4, right, there are 4 different strings in this list, there will be 4 iterations through the for loop. And here I'm going to again print, and I'm going to print 4 things in that list. I'm going to have I like, and then just, so I'll say I like, add a space there, and then it's just going to add to it every time through a different string from this list of things I like. Press enter. Right, and there we go. So the first time through, things was substituted for my dog. The second time Fridays, the third time ice cream, fourth time Python, right? And it just went through and made 4 sentences. So do we have any questions so far? Great. All right, so we're going to again do for I in. And this time we're going to do a string. And it is going to say, the string is going to be vertical, which means straight up and down. And we're just going to print I again. And this time it just takes on every character in the string, and every time it goes through. So I can print that, and vertical is then written vertically. So if the first iteration I took on V, and when it's printed, it just printed V on its own line, and again as it went down the page. All right. So that's an example of for loops. Let's look at slices and slicing. Slicing is used to duplicate part of a list, to create a new list with only some of the items from the original. And we use these square brackets and colon. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to do slicing. All right, so we're going to bring out a list of sports, football, soccer, volleyball, cross country. Okay, I'll let everyone catch up for one moment. I'm actually going to add swimming in here as well. I've had a request as well. I'm only going to add one more because I don't want this to be too long. But I've had a request for baseball, so we will add baseball in there as the last one. Awesome. All right, so we have our list of sports. And if I wanted to make another list of just some sports, I can make that by taking our initial list, our original list, sports, and splicing it using the two square brackets with a colon inside. Oop. A colon, not a semicolon, but a colon. And on either side of the colon, we're going to put an indice. So we're going to have two indices here. The first tells Python where to start. So if I want just the first three sports, football, soccer, and volleyball, in my sum sports list, we're going to tell Python to start at 0. So it's going to include football. And we want football, soccer, and volleyball. So we're going to, and that goes to the second indice, but we're going to put as the second indice down here, we're going to put a 3, because again, we're telling Python to go until that third item, but not include it. Right, so we're going to include the 0th, the first, and the second, but not the third. And so that tells Python, stop at the third and do not include the third. And that's how Python works. So we can take a look at some sports. And we'll see it's just football, soccer, and volleyball. And you can highlight this and copy it here. Because what we can also do if we don't type a first index, if we just leave it blank and have just that second 3, we'll notice that it's the same thing. It's football, soccer, volleyball. Again, because if you leave it blank and you only give it the one index, though you still have to have that colon, if you only give it the second index, Python assumes that you're starting from 0. So this is again saying go ahead, start from 0, include football, and go up to but not including the third index. So football, soccer, and volleyball. And all right, and if we have, if we wanted to do just cross country, swimming, and baseball, we could do some sports. And just like how we can have only the second index, we can also have only the first index. And what that tells Python is start with whichever index I put in, and this time we're going to put in that third index again because we want to include cross-country, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, including cross-country, and go ahead and just go to the end. So without putting that second index, include everything else in the list. So now we can look at some sports, and it's those 3. Cross-country, swimming, and baseball. All right, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, I'm going to give you guys a minute, and I want you to try to create a list with just volleyball and cross-country. And I'll fill those in. Just volleyball and cross-country. What would you type in here? Which 2 numbers? All right, so we have the index of volleyball is 2, and we're going to include that one. And then go up to, but not including the index for swimming. Right, so we're not going to include that 4th index, but we're going to go up to it. So we're going to include cross-country. We can check to make sure that's right, and it is. Yeah, Colton, perfect. Great. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is else-if statements, the last thing we're going to do today. So we can look here if we have a code where the top of the code's not here, but if we had a code where the user typed in the name of their cat, we could say if that cat name is Fuzzball, print your cat is fuzzy. So if this line is true, print your cat is fuzzy. Else, so if this line is not perfectly true, if it's false in any way, print this. We can actually have some more possible situations with else-if statements. So the user can type in the cat name, and Python will go down the line, top, bottom, and check if the statement is true. So if that cat name is Fuzzball, print this. If this is false, move to the next else-if statement, E-L-I-F, else-if. If this one is true, print this. If that one is false, move on to this one, etc. And it goes down. And if none of these are true, the else statement will be printed. Right? And so it's important only one of the blocks will be executed. So even if from this else-if statement and this else-if statement were true, only the first one would be printed. All right. So let's go ahead and check that out here. And you guys don't have to type out this code. We're just going to look at it real fast. This cat name code. And we have, let's run it. What is the name of your cat? And if I type in, that my cat is named Puff, it will let me know that my cat is Puffy. now here I have changed it so that instead, I think this used to say fat cat, but here I have fuzzball twice. So if I type that my cat is named Fuzzball, you might think, oh, well, is it going to print your cat is fuzzy and your cat is fat, or which is going to print? Because both of these lines are true. Cat name is equivalent to Fuzzball, and again, cat name is equivalent to Fuzzball. But you can see when you type that, only the first is going to print, because this statement is going to be true, this will be printed, and the code will continue after this else line here. It's going to continue after this if, else block, which is what this is called, and down to the next line of code. Great. All right, so the last thing we're going to do today is I'm going to go ahead and open the hangman code, and we are going to just briefly run through a sample run of the program. All right, so I ran it, and I know I switched from the PowerPoint into doing the hangman code, but we don't have a lot of time, and I just wanted to show how the game worked, because we are going to go through the code on Wednesday, and we're going to now just look at what to expect, and maybe you guys can start thinking about how we would use some of the things we have learned about, and take a look at your code and how they fit into gameplay. So the first thing that happens, the name of the game is printed, and we have that picture there of the empty gallows. I showed how many letters the letters I've missed so far, which right now is empty, and then I have a 6-letter word, 6 blanks. It's telling me to guess a letter. Alright, so first let's just try what happens if I guess a number. It lets me know I need to guess a letter. So what happens if I guess several letters? It will return that prompt. So let's give it a letter. Let's see E. When I guess, a whole new picture of those gallows shows up. And here, I got the letter correctly, so a blank was replaced with an E. And a blank was replaced with an A. What happens if I try to guess A again? It lets me know I already guessed that. Alright, so an R. Alright, so here I guessed S, but S was not in the word. It got added to this missed letters category, and a little head popped up. So let's see. Alright, Badger was the word. So I won, and it lets me win again if I'd like to, or play again if I want to. And I can play again, and if I hadn't have gotten that correct G, I would have had a leg, and it would have let me know I ran out of turns, right? So as you continue through the game, the picture progressed as I missed more and more letters. What happens, someone had a question, what happens if you guess a letter that appears twice in the secret word? It will actually be replaced as many times as it appears in the word, and we'll see how in the code we tackle that. But it does do that correctly. Alright, so let's take a look at the flowchart, and I really hope you guys got a chance to try your own flowcharts. And here, the first step, we are given a secret word, and Python does that for us. We see the board and the blanks, and then Python asks us to guess a letter. And either the letter is in the word or it's not, and if it is, there's 2 options. Either we go back to the board and guess another letter, or we had guessed the final letter and we won. If the letter that we guessed was not in the secret word, then either we're shown the board and we again guess another letter, or that was our last turn and we lose. Right, and we also have this, if I didn't enter a letter or I entered a letter I already guessed, we have this kind of back and forth too, where it just asks us to guess another letter. And no matter what, we're asked to play again, and it either ends or starts over with a new word. Okay. Reese, you're asking if there's a way that a new picture doesn't pop up and it's just in one place. There is a way to do that. It's going to be more complicated. This is just the simplest way to do that code, and it's by using the new ASCII art as opposed to having kind of like a graphics part. All right. So the last thing that we're going to do today is I'm going to show you guys this timing code that I'm going to put on Edmodo. I'm moving quickly between subjects, but let me see here. All right, so this code here, I'll show you how it runs. Oops, my hangman game was still going on. All right, I am presented with this sentence that I need to type, and once I type it and press enter, it recorded how long it took me to type that sentence. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and put this code for you guys up. What it's using is this time.time function from the time module, and you use it to create a start and an end time, and then you can subtract those to figure out how long it took you for something to happen. So you put the time before and after what you want to time, and then you can subtract them. And I want you guys, I'm going to put this code up, I want you guys to take a look at it and see if you can figure out how it works. And then your challenge, this is just a challenge, so it's something that we really want you guys to try and do, but you're not going to be graded on it or anything like that. Is to think about different ways you can modify it. How could you add a random element to it so that maybe you're not typing the same thing every time, maybe you're typing different lines of code or different prompts. Or what if your users want to try again? Or maybe you offer, are you ready for your sentence? And then the user can indicate yes, that they're ready, and then they start timing. You know, you can, this is just a really basic code that you guys can improve upon to create your own game. All right. So go ahead. You guys can work on that. I will again remind you guys of the quote-unquote open mic that we have on Wednesday, 9 to 10. You can email here, and remember to email the whole code if you have a question about your hangman code. If something's not quite working, we're going to be going through that on Wednesday. Does anyone have any questions? Oh. Hey, Steven, do you have a question?
What are we going to do in labs this week?
I'm actually not sure what you guys are doing in labs this week. I believe you're working with more physical computing and with the lights. Okay. But that would, I know Mr. D has a better idea of what's going on with labs. Sorry about that.
Hey, that's okay. Mr. D doesn't know half the time what's going on. Hey guys, we're going to be playing more with our LEDs, only this time we're going to start using Python to control them, and we're going to be using a switch. So you're going to learn how to turn some things on and off with our lights and get moving that way with it. Okay? Whoever was asking?
It was Steven, but I muted him. Sorry.
All right. Steve, why don't we, I'll mute him here. I'll see if Steve's got. Thanks, I appreciate you muting him. No worries. Sure. Steven.
Yes.
Does that make sense, man?
Yeah, alright, thank you.
All right, you enjoying the class?
Yes.
Good, guys. And we'll also talk a lot of cool things coming up this week. I'm looking forward to sharing them with you.
Great. All
Well,
right.
thank you, Denise.
No problem. Thanks, Mr. D. And I will talk to you guys on Wednesday. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with to modify the little timing game. And again, that will be up on Edmodo tonight.
Denise, can
Yes.
I ask, Miss the young lady who got her braces, how's your mouth feeling?
Oh, Annie Page.
Was it Colette or Ann?
I think it was Annie.
I thought it was Annie too. Hey, Annie, how's your mouth doing?
It's fine. I've gotten used to them by now.
It wasn't much
I'm
fun
glad.
the first few days, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Great.
sorry.
All right. All right,
Okay,
guys.
kiddo. Take care,
Have
guys.
a nice Monday evening.
Everybody take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.